What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. Plenty of analysts, high profile athletes, important players and personnel in the NFL circles. They have all came and struck Zach Wilson with lightning bolts in one way or another. We have another huge one here. Richard Sherman, he had some pretty damning comments about Zach Wilson after his performance against the Patriots. And then in regards to what his post game press conference statements were regarding feeling like he did not let his defense down. So Richard Sherman says, I understand finding positives, but this terrible play has been the case for weeks. Mac Jones played under exact same conditions, 23 of 27 for 246 yards. He's not good enough for the NFL, and the sooner the Jets realize that, the better off the rest of this team will be. So it's pretty cut clear and dry where Richard Sherman stands on this issue, not only with Zach Wilson, what his performance has been, but on the fact that he doesn't even feel like he should be in the NFL. And I think that is a very important question that Robert Saleh obviously is probably soul searching for. I think a lot of us, based on that Monday press conference, was pretty shocked to hear that he wasn't 100% committed to Zach Wilson, even though I think we all have the feeling that he's going to still start against the Bears this week. He's just going to have a very short leash. But everything up until this point has been that we're focusing on Zach Wilson's development. He's our guy. He's the future. He has the keys to the franchise. We're going to continue to try to work with him, get him developed and built up, make things easier, etc. And I don't think that's changed for the most part, but there's definitely a shift in narration for the New York Jets and what this season can mean to us and what this can mean for the future, right? All in all, winning cures everything, as they say, right? So even during the 5-1 stretch, the 5 wins, Zach Wilson secured the one loss prior to this Patriots game. A lot of that got swept under the rug. People were critical to a certain extent of Zach Wilson, but everything kind of stopped at we're winning in lieu of him. A lot of the conversations trended towards just wanting to see the game manager role, ball security, don't cause any issues where the defense can't take advantage of the opponents, because let's face it, we have the leg up on any given week. And now it's completely switched. People are bringing things that we haven't seen since the 2021 season out of the woodworks. But again, it's a very important question. Not only is Zach Wilson the future for the New York Jets franchise, is he even an NFL level talent at quarterback? And I think it's hard for a lot of people to say yes at this point. So there's two different ways to kind of view this, right? There's the people that buy into a lot, excuse me, of what the statistics say and what that story and narrative looks like for Zach Wilson. The other side is, what does the game film say? What is the all 22? What do you see methodically from Zach Wilson in terms of going through his progressions? What do you see about his mechanics that seem like they're building a more consistency or developing, etc.? A lot of us are kind of living in the statistical realm, right? And probably much needed. So for the longest time now, we haven't had a legit defense, let alone an offense. We've been hanging our hat on special teams, which nobody has cared about until recently. So we have the league leading. We're the league leading team in NFL rookies that are getting the Pepsi Rookie of the Week awards. We have a young budding wide receiver in Garrett Wilson that looks like, if we can get satisfactory quarterback performance, he has a chance to jump up there in the offensive rookie of the year conversations. And I know that kind of has to be in the back of his mind, even though everybody's pressed that this is a team sport. We only care about the wins. But I think you can see that's not necessarily the case. There is a little bit more individuality and maybe selfishness to that certain degree when it comes to hardware and some of these statistics and things like that we want to see. It's been hinted at a little bit in some of Garrett Wilson's comments. Obviously, Elijah Moore's trade request was a huge factor of that. And so, yeah, I mean, putting that aside, though, statistically, when you take a look at Zach Wilson, I think best case scenario, when I peeped at this, he ranks somewhere in the top top portion of the bottom seven of 32 quarterbacks in the league, and in certain various categories, he's not even in the starting 32. He's placing like 33 or 34 or 35. It is pretty crazy to see. So statistically, I try not to fully view into all of that, but I mean, this is one of those, I don't even want to say rare cases, but it's one of those scenarios where what you see on the game film and what you can see by just looking at a stat sheet matches up pretty closely. There's a few key stats that stood out to me when I was taking a look at some things, right? And this is just based off his sample size. I'm not going based off any rankings from, 32 quarterbacks around the league. So he's played 20 games. 13 of his 20 games have resulted in him completing less than 60% of his passes. In 11 of 20 of his games, he's gone without a passing touchdown. And in 10 of 20 of his games, he's had less than 200 air yards. And the air yards was critical to me because it essentially means this is just the distance from when the ball leaves his hand to how many yards before it's either, dropped, it's been batted down, it makes it to the receiver, and then they do, yards after catch, which wouldn't be calculated into this. So I like it because it's a pretty good indicator of maybe how aggressive he's being versus the rest of the NFL, or just what schematically we're looking for. And it was pretty eye-opening to me. I knew things were bad. Things didn't necessarily click until I seen it from this perspective, just taking a look at his 20 games and not trying to compare him to any of the other quarterbacks around the league. So even if you just want to go self-evaluation style with it, it is pretty porous. It's pretty porous. I mean, in this day and age, I'm not asking for them to go the Joe Flacco route and we have him throwing, an average of 52 passes a game or whatever it was. I don't think he's the quarterback that this fits for. I've said it multiple times in the comments, chatting with you guys and stuff. I felt like he was a guy that really needed to sit at least for the year, or at least for a good majority of year one, and then let him step in. I'm thinking back, and I do remember that you wouldn't necessarily say Mike White should have got the keys to the New York Jets, or bringing in Joe Flacco was going to be an immediate sign that we didn't have to play him immediately. You kind of got the understanding very quickly, and then Robert Saleh and company announced it pretty quickly that they were going to go through this trial by fire approach. Let's get him the experience. We feel like he can handle everything that comes with the dread of a 17-game season, not having all your pieces in place just yet since his year one as a rookie, that it's going to be a developing team, and that he can handle the mental stress, not only of the game and going through preparation and figuring out, how everything works in this league, but the media and the New York media can be absolutely savage. And so when I take a look at him, I try to skew away from the statistics as much as possible. And when we go based off, and, I'm not a guy that's sitting here watching all 22s. I'm not breaking down film necessarily. I do a lot of this just kind of reviewing Play Like a Jet, X Factor, plenty of other guys out there that are experienced in this. They have league experience, yada, yada. So there's a few different categories that I feel like goes into having a successful quarterback, right? And these are very high level, obviously subjective, whatever. So let me know what your guys' key traits may be. But for one, playmaking would be a huge category for me, right? It's hard to quantify what playmaking would mean, but I mean, you can kind of see it when it happens on the field. When we take a look at the quarterbacks that we have right now, the only names that really scream playmaker to me is Chris Streveler, basing this purely based off what we've seen in preseason, right? I think anybody that has the ability to lead multiple comeback games has some kind of it factor to them. And then Mike White, and this is largely based on what we've seen last year, and it's very up in the air depending on which side you're on. New York Jets fans is either all or nothing for us. But again, huge game. The Bengals one was sensational. You don't just have games like that. I think those are certain things where obviously that's an outlier. But prior to him getting hurt in that Colts game, you've seen another huge performance that looked like it was going to come. So playmaking ability, can you elevate? And this is all kind of what's going into it. can you make plays that seemingly seem impossible? Can you elevate the play of guys around you? Um, and do you strike some level of fear, I guess, in the defense? And there's a lot of ways you can see this. Teams that opt to drop seven in coverage consistently, teams that think maybe the way to try to fully disrupt you is to, blitz seven guys, 50 out of 60 plays in a game. Um, there was even, and it's so crazy. I hate the Patriots so much. But it was crazy to hear and see that admission from Bill Belichick that, essentially these aren't his full words, but this is basically what happened. Zach Wilson alone, I don't think it was the New York Jets as a whole anymore, but Zach Wilson alone was so bad that he was able to look forward a little bit to, I think it's the Vikings that they have coming up. And so he's essentially saying, like, I didn't put in 100% effort like I normally would, game planning for a team, because I'm playing 3 games in 21 days. We know this New York Jets game is essentially going to be a win. It just depends on how hard the defense plays, etc. So that lets me know right there, Zach Wilson automatically is getting no respect around the NFL in terms of game planning. They can run a vanilla coverage all day, and they probably have a good chance of having success against Zach Wilson. So there's the playmaking ability, there's the ball security, and it doesn't look great for Zach Wilson there either. You probably have to rely a little bit more on statistics there, right? There's the interceptions that he's thrown, and I think he's 13 touchdowns versus 20 interceptions in his career. And then I think he has 6 fumbles so far, and 5 of those came in his rookie year last year. So that's great. He's done a much better job this year. Again, he doesn't rush a whole lot, so there's something to say to that as well. But I do also think that's huge because he has taken 60 sacks so far. And so, we've seen Joe Flacco cough up, as I heard Buffalo Jet fan, or at least somebody commenting me that they heard this from Buffalo Jet fan. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. So I can live with that. So the playmaking department, I don't think we've seen it really from Zach Wilson. There's been very few flashes in the pan there. Ball security, I think that's a plus at this point. At least when it comes to fumbles, the interception thing. We've seen that he has the ability to do it, which would lead me to my next point, mental fortitude. I've gone on record saying this already. I think Zach Wilson's confidence is shot, and it's crazy how much of an impact confidence can be, right? You can get so shaken up by not wanting to do something wrong that'll draw the ire of your team, or that, will cause you to go further into the well, that you start making absolutely egregious mistakes that other people just can't comprehend. It makes sense to you because you thought it was the safest play. It's one of the, the few things you feel like through and through. And so, I mean, you can't, there's too many examples just in this game alone. You can go back to the last 2 weeks, last 3 weeks. It doesn't really matter. There are so many passes that Zach Wilson is missing, and I could live with that if he had a higher completion percentage, or, at least something I can grab onto. But there's not a single part of Zach Wilson's game that I can say, all right, I know we at least have this going for us. He started using his legs in the first half of the Patriots game. I figured maybe he'll just have a successful running day. He hasn't really had a huge one since that Jacksonville game where he faked out the guy on the sideline and picked up, I think 70 yards or something like that. Maybe he's due for another one, but then, he kind of abandoned that. But it's the fact that you see a lot of times on film, it looks like, and even in highlights, it looks like he's staring down a guy that's open, potential scoring plays, first down conversions, chunk plays, etc. And you see him either not throw that ball, or you see him pump fake it, and then he immediately has to run because pressure is coming towards him. And it's so maddening because at this point, I would almost prefer to see Jameis Winston in this offense, where I could live with him throwing 30 interceptions, over the course of this season, because I know he's going to at least triple that for the most part. He was a big playmaking guy. So, for every interception he throws, there's going to be a lot of wild plays that come with that. And I'm not saying that's what I'm looking for in this offense or anything, but I mean, you would have to imagine that the defense would still look as great as it did. The offense, we would be putting up points. This would be more of a can you stop this team in a shootout kind of a situation where our defense can play lockdown coverage. Yes, they might have to get back onto the field more often than usual. I can't say it'd be any more than what they're doing right now, which is crazy, but they probably be on the field more often than a normal defense, but they go out there, they make plays, they shut it down. They at least know that the offense is capable of going out there and scoring on any given play, and we don't really have that. So the mental fortitude stuff, I think between this post-game press conference that we've seen, bits and pieces that I've heard and seen from him in conferences before, he's been rattled by the media for about 3 weeks in a row now. And maybe it's just kind of wearing and tearing on him that even when he's winning, he's kind of being crapped on. Depending on which analyst you go to, I want to say, I don't think it was Dan Orlovsky. It was Chris Sims. Chris Sims just reposted a bunch of highlight videos from Zach Wilson, or at least game film anyways, breaking down why this wasn't a complete disaster of a game. Yes, it was terrible, but a lot of reasons as to what happened, why, and, yes, it was one of his worst games. I think Chris Sims admitted, but there was a lot of stuff that people don't understand that went into this. Great coverage by the Patriots. Certain receivers not really running routes the way they should have needed to, the whole gambit. Whatever. But it's something there. Something with Zach Wilson, and whether that's the fear of letting his defense down, even though he says that he doesn't necessarily care about that, or that he doesn't care about his statistics. I don't feel like he's pressing the same way we've seen in year one, where he just wants to make, a bunch of highlight plays and, look great in the film room when they go back to it. At certain points now, it's just really like, let's not do anything that looks bad, ever. And playing the game scared, and this happens for anything across any sports realm, the NBA, hockey, football, soccer. If you play scared, not only do you invite injuries, another huge issue for them, but you also it's kind of, what do we call it? You are self-fulfilling prophecy. There we go. So, by virtue of playing like you're fearing making turnovers and stuff, you're essentially going to, make that a reality. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I don't want to go into the whole gambit of what's breaking down there. Those are just some of my high level thoughts, but let me know what you guys think. I think this is a huge question that we all need to ask ourselves. Some of you have asked me what do I think about Zach Wilson, so I guess I'll end this here. Personally, I'm not ready to give up on Zach Wilson, and this is almost maybe word for word kind of what I commented to one of you guys, but with Zach Wilson, I have the understanding that when we drafted him, this was more based on traits that we've seen on film versus consistent, solid production. There were things that he did, his multiple release points, the off-platform throws, just the arm strength on his own, being able to, take a lot of these balls off his back foot, squeeze these into some tight windows. All that stuff is great. We wanted all of those things. What we were hoping for is that we can reel a lot of these inconsistencies in, right? Let's stop on three-step drops, not setting your feet right away, right? Like every 3 passes from Zach Wilson is him, trying to toss something off his back foot from a sidearm angle. It's crazy. Not throwing from multiple angles when you don't necessarily have to, standing tall in the pocket, not being skittish when you actually have a pocket to throw into and running into pressure, creating that on your own. Not staring down reads, not throwing in a double coverage in key situations and key times where we don't need a turnover. We can sacrifice having no points, or we can just take this field goal that we're going to get. We don't have to try to squeeze a touchdown out in this situation. So there's a lot of stuff between what I've seen from analysts and just kind of my own understanding that leads me to think he either isn't picking up on what this coaching staff is teaching him he should really be doing with his reads and running this offense, or uh, like, I don't even know how to put this. Personality wise, maybe, how he thinks an offense should work just doesn't mesh with what we're looking to do, which is pretty disheartening. That's something I figured we would definitely have worked out by now. But a huge factor in this that I've always pointed out is that the passing of Greg Knapp, rest in power, that was a huge loss for us. He was the glue that was going to keep everything on offense together, the soil that was going to keep this offense growing, and continuing to try to elevate. And we never replaced him. When it came to Zach Wilson, we just surrounded him with more resources, which may not have necessarily gone right? The offensive coordinator may want him to attack and do things and handle situations differently than his quarterback coach, which will be different than his personal quarterback coach. And so, it was kind of addition by subtraction, as I called it, when we got rid of a lot of those additional voices in his ear. But we never quite replaced Greg Knapp. So, Robert Saleh was most likely trying to look for connections that he had, maybe connections that Mike LaFleur had and trusted. But I think that would be the next logical step. Let Zach Wilson spend the rest of this season really trying to hone in and rebuild himself and his confidence. And we need to find some kind of veteran presence. I'm not talking a quarterback, but somebody in the coaching staff that can realign all expectations, get Zach Wilson fast-tracked again. And we've seen this. Daniel Jones is a prime example. We're even seeing it with Justin Fields, and I don't know if it was Justin Fields, whether it's something with the coaching staff clicking and just, allowing things to facilitate, allowing Justin Fields to facilitate the offense through his legs and not necessarily through his arms until he can continue to develop that piece of his game. We need to see a program that's perfectly fitted for Zach Wilson and, what he can do right now. Versus what he'll try to do in the future or what we want to try to put on his plate and test out. So, yeah, either way, let me know what your guys' thoughts are with where you stand on Zach Wilson and him either being the future of the franchise, not being an NFL quarterback, period. It'll be fun to see. So, appreciate you guys watching. All the support as always, and I'll catch you again. Peace.